Good afternoon. My name is Ofer Feinerman. I come from the Department of Physics of Complex Systems in the Weizmann Institute in Israel. And I'm kind of somewhere between a physicist and a biologist or something like that. So I will give my talk here on the slides. And I work on ants. I'm an experimentalist. I work on ants. Okay, so these are ants. So when you try to look at ants, usually this is the kind of things that you'll see. And it may look interesting if you wanted to look a bit closer, but it's a bit hard to look at them. There's so many of them. It's very hard to tell them apart, right? When you start to look and you start following, very hard to tell them apart, very hard to know what they're doing, what they're saying to each other. And you look a bit more, and they all look pretty stupid. And at the same time, all this time, they're actually eating your apple, so usually it's not that easy to observe ants, and soon you can get a bit panicky and even more panicky, and you want some order, right? You want somehow to organize your thoughts. Our brain is not made to look at so many things at the same time. Okay, so coming down, let's see some very simple features of ants. So first, ants always come in groups, right? You never see an ant alone, or rarely see an ant alone. They always come in groups. Actually, these groups are typically families. They're sisters. All of them are sisters, one of the other. And so we have groups of ants, and these groups of ants, they work together to solve all kinds of riddles, all kinds of puzzles. You see them work together towards solving these riddles, right? One ant cannot breach this gap, but here the group somehow did it. Okay, so the ants are working cooperatively. And then another property of ants, which is a bit more biological. Okay, so you need the biology to know about this. So all these ants are actually sisters. They're all daughters of this large ant here, which is the queen. And this queen, she's a fertile insect. She gives birth to the next generations. But all these ants, all her daughters, are actually sterile. They cannot give birth. Also, this means that there is no conflict between them. Okay, when an ant, if you have another group of animals, okay, maybe other animals live in groups like birds, etc. So these birds, even people, we live together, but at the same time there's conflict between us, right? The birds, each bird wants to have more offspring, and each person wants to have more money. Okay, you don't just give your money to somebody else. Okay, you prefer, but you give your money easily to your children, right? Okay, so the ants somehow have a way to work around this. They're just all sterile. It's a big group of sterile workers, and actually, the evolution-wise, right, to pass their genes to the next generation, what they have to do is give as much food as they can and as much care as they can to the queen. Okay, so there is no selfishness. Okay, so all these ants are actually working to solve a riddle together, but in a cooperative means. Okay, there is a cooperative. There is a global goal, a goal that is true for each ant at the same time, a collective goal. Okay, it's very different from other animal groups. Okay, so we have this group that works towards solving things together in a very cooperative way, okay, non-conflicting way, and it's decentralized. Okay, so this big ant here, she's called the queen because when people saw her in the past, okay, they imagined in the human society, and this is the queen who rules over everybody, etc. But the queen actually does not rule over anybody. She's typically just buried very deep inside the nest. She doesn't know anything. She just has to eat and lay eggs. And actually, the system is very much as people understand it, it's a very decentralized system. Okay, so there is no central control. There's no one. Okay, especially surely not the queen, but also no other ants that anybody really knows of, that has central control, that all the information passes through someone who makes the decisions, etc. Okay, so we have this group of decentralized animals working towards a collective goal. And this reminds us of something, actually. And there's something, okay, so if I look at the ants and I panic first and then I calm down, so now I'm telling myself that I've reached the right place, right? The thing that the theory, or if you want to put order in your mind to look at these things, what you should do is distributed computing, right? It shares so many things with the properties I just spelled out. Okay, so actually I'm just arrived at the right place, and then within one slide I passed from panic to euphoria. Okay, and of course there's a lot of you can see a lot of parallels between this biological system and distributed computing. Okay, here you have biological ensembles. There's also many other ensembles. In biology, all of biology is made of ensembles, or much of biology is made of ensembles. Again, ants is a very special ensemble because there's no conflict in it. In distributed computing, we look at group of processors. Okay, and then we have no central control in both of them. We have some noisy individuals and noisy interactions in both of them, maybe different kinds of noise that we look at. But also this is similar. Okay, here we look at the behavioral rules of ants, and here we look at algorithms. And we measure collective functionality in the ants. Again, all the ants, okay, they act as one. They act for one goal. The goal is in the queen. And usually these algorithms, we check them for collective performance, right? We don't look at the performance from the viewpoint of any single processor, but of the system as a whole. Okay, and now there's another reason to calm down, now that we have the theoretical basis by which we can, a theoretical basis by which we can start thinking about ants. Another reason to calm down is technology. So again, when I go outside and I look at ants, it's very difficult with the human eye to follow all the things that are going around, that are happening at the same time. It's hard to look at many things happening at the same time. But in our lab, we have a lot of cameras, we have computers, and today cameras are very good, very cheap. Computers are very fast. And we can actually look at the ants working together. So this is actually even filmed outside in the field near the nest of the ants. We come there, we put this piece of paper on the floor, and we film the ants, and then we bring it back to the lab, the movie from the camera, and we put it inside a tracking algorithm. And you can see we have now, it tracks all the ants. It gives us names for the ants, their trajectories, okay, etc. And now it becomes much easier to look at. Okay, so we have here, for example, ant 44. You can look at it for a long time, see what it did without being confused, see who it talked to, etc., and go back, go forward. Okay, so it becomes much easier to look and to analyze. And now, actually, what we see the ants doing here is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this talk. It's called cooperative transport. So actually, these are very small ants. They're 2 millimeters big. They're called crazy ants in their non-scientific name. And this is a Cheerio. So I'm not sure if in France, if you have Cheerios in France, but it's a breakfast cereal, Cheerio. So we put it near their nest. The ants come, and one ant comes, she finds it. We'll see more about it, but she cannot carry it alone. You see, it's too big for one ant. And then she goes, she recruits, calls her friends. They all gather around the object, and together they can move it. Okay, and this is actually a very rare phenomenon in the animal world. And apart from ants, there are many ant species. So not all ant species do it, but there are many ant species that do it. Apart from that, almost the only other animal that can do this is human. Okay, maybe there are 2 other examples in the whole animal world. So it's a very non-trivial behavior. Okay. Okay, so now let's look a little bit more about modeling ants as processors. Okay, so again, I'm not a computer scientist, and I just want to raise this question so you guys can think about it during the rest of the talk. And when you want to think of ants as processors, you kind of come into some problems which may be interesting. And one of these, again, that it's kind of connected to the rest of the talk, is that usually when you think of a processor in computer science, it's limited almost uniquely by the number of the memory bits it has, right? Maybe also the CPU a little, but if it has such and such memories, it can perform these and that computation, and then not some other computations that require more memory. And you can kind of define all the computations that it can do, and those that it can't. So that's a processor, and usually when you prove something, you can use these bits, these memory bits in any way that you like. Okay, and ants are kind of different. Okay, so ants. So this is an ant. It's also an ant that's found in Israel. It's a desert runner ant, it's called, and it has inside its head not a processor but a brain. This brain has 100,000 neurons, compared to the, I think, 10 to the 12 neurons that we have in our heads. So here it's 10 to the 5 neurons. And and these ants can do several things quite remarkably. So these are experiments actually that were done in the Sahara, not by me. So it's a guy from Switzerland called Rudiger Wenner. And what he did is he tracked these ants as they were going to look for food. So they're going to look for food in the desert. They're actually looking for some insect. They are very resistant to heat. And they're looking for other insects that went out by mistake and are not resistant to heat and are just lying on their back and dying. So this ant is going out from the nest, and she starts to walk around. And this is 10 meters. This ant is 1 centimeter. And she walks like this and like this and like this for about 20, 30 minutes or more. So you can see she did much more than 100 meters of trajectory. And here she finds the food. And once she finds it, okay, so this is done in the Sahara in some place where there's no landmarks whatsoever. So he chose a place to do the experiments. You look everywhere, it's flat all around, nothing. She finds the food, and this is the trajectory back. She heads straight back home. Okay, and actually what this ant did, and again, Rudiger Wenner, he proved this very nicely. I will not repeat here. She actually counts the steps, so count the steps like little vectors, and she adds. She remembers the vector until now, and she adds the next step, and she actually does vector integration inside her head. And when she comes here and she found the food, she has the vector pointing home, the distance and and she can go straight home. Okay, so quite remarkable. As humans, we cannot imagine to do it, and she does it with this tiny brain. However, the same ant.
Does it all ants do like this, or just this kind?
Sorry?
Just all ants do like this?
It looks like many ants can do it. It was only proven for this ant. It's
Not this themselves, but aircraft would do it.
Sorry?
Aircraft would use it before GPS. They would use vector integration to navigate around the Earth.
Yes.
So you say humans wouldn't do it,
Ah,
but
with the GPS.
no, before the GPS, the aircraft they would.
Yeah, the aircraft.
Integrate their own trajectory to know where they are.
Ah, no, but I mean a human being without a computer to aid it, yeah. Or GPS. I mean, when you do orienteering, it's very hard to count. Maybe you can count one turn,
When you say
and that's it.
then does this, what does that actually mean?
What do the proof mean? There are many papers that prove it.
By looking
I
at
mean,
the brain or by...
No, not by looking at the brain, by just behavioral experiments. So for example, you can just, when the ants find the food, you can move her here, and then just to make sure that there's nothing that she was seeing, and then she'll come back here. Or another thing he did, he put little toothpicks on their legs when they reached here. So now each step becomes larger, and then they reached here. But that's just some examples. He has it's a very beautiful work. If you look at it, he has many. Of course, there's never proof in biology, but there's many evidence supporting this.
So you mean that they somehow keep remember the direction?
Yeah.
If it will be just rotated a bit, then she will come to a different place or not?
Yeah, they remember the direction, so they need a direction, so they have the sun. They use the sun. So that's the only thing they have is the sun in the sky.
They don't have magnetic
powers.
Yeah, not these guys. Some ants will have it. Okay, but anyway, they're not they're not the subject of my talk. Even they may be quite interesting. But what I want to say about these ants, that if we take this ant, for example, and ask it to distinguish 3 objects from 5 objects or something like this, then she will most surely fail. She will not even be able to count to 3 or 5. Okay, so we have this kind of a processor, very different from this one, right? If this processor could do this, it could also count to 5. Well, these animals, there's something very different. Okay, and now, sorry?
How do you know it?
Well, you can, on bees, there are, for example, experiments to show how well they could count, right? Because bees, they work a lot visually, and they learn which flowers are profitable and which flowers are not profitable. And then you could teach bees, show it a flower with 3 lines on it and a flower with 5 lines in it, and see if she can distinguish between them, for example. And if she learns to distinguish between them, and let's say 5 lines always has then she will go there. But if you give her something that she cannot learn, then she will go randomly between them. And this way you can, for example, peek into their mind and see what they can do and what they cannot. Okay, so they have also but also I guess from your experience as humans, something we can do very nicely, right? Image analysis we're very good at. Well, some things much better than computers. Some things were much worse. Okay, so now the question here is a bit different than in distributed computing. Is how do you take these individuals that are very smart at some things and less smart at other things, and take many of them and assemble them together and try to get the best out of both worlds, right? When you assemble them together, you don't want to lose the smartness of them. so you somehow want to keep what you can do at this scale, but at the same time, you do want to gain as much as you can from the group. Okay, so the question is a bit different than what you usually do and see in distributed computing. Okay, so now the outline of what I'll show next is this kind of balance between the group and the individual. How do you gain the best out of both worlds? Okay, in the first part, we're actually going to look at navigation, like the example I showed, and ants are good navigators. Every insect is a very good navigator. And we'll see how the group actually uses this knowledge of individuals of how to navigate and amplifies it. Okay, so the group just serves as an amplifier to what the individuals already know. Okay, so that will be the first part. And then the second and third part will actually show how the group can actually improve over the individuals, not just use them, but improve over them in other contexts. Okay, for example, in all kinds of contexts where the individual do not grasp the scene or make mistakes. Okay, so the first example is again going back to this cooperative transport. Okay, so you can ask, as I said, it's a pretty rare phenomenon. You can ask how the ants do it. How can they move in one direction? And actually what they do, and maybe the best thing to do, is if everybody pulls in the same direction, right? If all ants around this object would pull in different directions, it will not go very far. There's many tug of wars. You lose a lot of energy, and it will not go in straight lines, right? So it's not the way to go. If you want to move fast, get the food as fast as you can out of the way, so no other ant species neighboring colonies come and steal it. You have to go as fast as possible. So for this, everybody has to pull in the same direction. Okay, so this, we call it behavioral conformism. Okay, why is it? Because when you attach to the object, you feel the object is going there, you want to pull in the same direction as it's going. You don't want to fight your friends. Okay, and actually, what this gives you, if we look at, okay, so we have many hours of such movies, And in these hours, sometimes we see 5 ants carrying the object, sometimes 10, sometimes 15, just varies naturally. And we can measure the speed, the mean speed that it moved, given the number of ants that we're carrying. And what we see is that there is a linear rise. The more ants we're carrying, the faster it goes, and does so linearly. Okay? This actually tells us the ants are not fighting each other. It's not that each ant is pulling in the direction that she's attached. Okay? They're attached all around the object. But they're actually all trying to pull in the same direction. Or if they're in the back, they can lift to reduce the friction. Okay? If everybody was pulling in a different direction, you expect something more like a square root. Okay? And then at the end, it comes, of course, to some saturation because they cannot go infinitely fast. Okay, so this is the good side of behavioral conformism. We have the group. Everybody's trying to act like its neighbors. You get a very effective group. All the forces add up. Yeah, it'll be.
But I understand, even if they were all pulling the same direction, I wouldn't expect a linear change because to walk sideways is a lot harder than walking forward.
Yeah, so these are mean, so it's mean over many, many realizations. I mean, there's hours of this. Okay, and so each ant maybe counts. If all of them were, if we built something that all of them were in the front, maybe the line would be steeper.
The task was exactly the same in all experiments.
Yes. Yeah, we just put it near their nest and let them take it. A very natural experiment. Yeah, this is for same size. Later we'll see different sizes as well. And now the bad side of behavioral conformism is also so these are actually trajectories of how the object moved towards the nest. So these are not ant trajectories. This is the object. So it's about 1 meter that we measured over. And you can see in general, we put it here, it went towards the nest. Okay, so that's in general, the thing works. But you see they often make mistakes and loops, and they often go in the wrong direction. And again, you can imagine yourself carrying something heavy and trying to go with the group. You'll often be going in wrong directions. Okay? If you're just trying to align yourself with everybody else, it means that no good information is coming in, right? You're just aligning yourself with the group. You're not looking outside to navigate. And then you can make many mistakes. Okay, so this is actually the bad side of behavioral conformism. Okay, so we kind of see both of them in the behavior of the ants. Okay, so now the question is how, if they get lost, how do they reach home anyway? Okay, and now I'll show a short movie. And this movie will show us a leader. So actually in this movie, it's very short. I'll describe it first. I don't know if there's too much light on the...
Does anybody know how to turn off this light?
Maybe here?
Oh.
I do. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so actually we're going to see some ants carrying this Cheerio. And this is direction to the nest is to the left. And these ants are actually, as I said, they're often making mistakes. They're trying to go with each other, but it can be in the wrong direction. So we're going to see them making a mistake, and they're going to go upwards. Thanks. And then we'll see an ant which attaches to the object from the outside. Okay, so you see they're going upwards, they're going in the wrong direction. And now look at this ant. She attaches here. And the moment she attached, even though she was one against many, the moment she attached, the object turned to the left. I don't know if it's again. So she attaches to the object and starts pulling it to the left. Okay, so this one ant was somehow able to overpower the entire group that was making a mistake and start moving the object to the left in the correct direction to the nest. Okay, so this was one example. Actually, we can look at over many examples like this. So if time 0 is the time that a new ant attached, and this y-axis is the information in bits that we take just out of the direction of the motion, information in bits that the object has about where home is, then we see that before It had some information, but often it was wrong, so it's above 0, but it's not that big. And the moment the ant attached, it becomes better aimed toward home. Okay, they're navigating towards the nest, where they should go. So these ants make a positive effect, but it only lasts for a little while. Okay, so after about 10 seconds, less than 10 seconds, the positive effect of this new ant, on average, is gone. Okay, so we call these ants leaders. Why do we call them leaders? Because their action actually affected a whole group. Okay, that's what a leader does. They're transient leaders because after 10 seconds they're gone. And also they are informed leaders. Why? Because ants that are walking here outside, they know very well where they are compared to these ants that are kind of lost and going the wrong way. They know very well where they are. They have information, and they use this information to guide the whole group. And the whole group somehow lets them lead. Why do I say that they let them lead? Because if the whole group would try to keep on going upwards, and this ant would be pulling here, you'd expect a very wide turn, right? Because you have like the angle would be 8/1, the cosinus of the angle or something. You'll expect a very wide turn, but that's not what we see. We saw that the moment this ant attached, it went up, she attached, and it went left. Okay, so somehow she was able to lead the entire group, change everybody's mind at once. Okay, maybe I'll skip this slide. Okay, I'll just show it like this. Okay, so these just this middle part. So these ants come and go. There's new leader each time. So this is the trajectory of the object, and each time we identify a new leader, we color it in a different color. And you see that every time there's a new leader, she comes, she has her day of glory, leads for a while, and then another one comes, another one, and all these piece together and make the whole trajectory towards the nest. Okay, now the question that stayed with us: how could this leader make such a sharp turn? How come everybody listened to her? Okay, and for this we constructed a model. It's quite a simple model. It's actually a model of forces, and right, everything here is tractable by forces and very simple mechanics and physics. So we have this kind of model. And the model has two kinds of ants. It has the ants that are non-informed. These are the ants that are carrying. They're kind of lost. What these ants do, they just try to go with the flow, as I said before. If I feel that it's coming towards me, the object, I just pull in the same direction. If it's going away from me, I lift. Okay, but I don't fight the group. So this is what these guys do. And then there's another kind of ants, and these are ants that just came from the outside, and they are informed. And what they do when they attach, they actually don't go with the group. They don't listen to what the others are telling them. They just attach to the object and pull it in the direction they think is correct. Okay, so these are the ingredients of the model, most of them. And okay, and it has one more ingredient, and this is this non-informed ants that I told you until now that they're so conformist. We don't make them 100% conformist. Okay, so we let them do like nonsensical actions 10% of the time, let's say. Okay, so usually they go with the flow. Sometimes they pull in just random directions. Yeah?
Do these ants also know how to do vector addition, or they don't?
Didn't know what? Sorry, I didn't get it.
So like your old example, the ant knew which direction it was going exactly, but these ones do not?
Yeah, so the ants that carry do not, but then there's ants that come from the outside.
But I'm saying if it was the same species as before, then they should
Yes.
also know which direction.
Yeah, so again, once they're attached to this object, they lose their direction. Okay, they lose their directionality. And if they wouldn't lose their directionality and all the ants knew all the time, they could act as a new ant, right? The new ant will.
Yeah, my question is why?
Yeah.
Why do they lose?
Why do they lose? So they need their antennas, for example, to navigate. Okay, so the antennas are now on this big, smelly Cheerio instead of being near the floor navigating. So these ants rely a lot on smell. Okay, and there are other reasons as well. I can tell you later. Okay, but there are physical reasons. When you carry something big, also if you've ever carried something very big, you can imagine it on your own, right? It gets hard to know sometimes where you are and where you're going.
Solve the problem while it carries it.
Sorry?
Solve the problem while it carries it.
Okay, and this is what the model actually tells us. So here we look in the small panel here. So we look at this model, and the model, we can easily change the size of the object. And the model tells us that as we look at larger and larger objects, it's going this way. Okay, the roughness of the path, how straight it is, will go down. Okay, so small objects should walk in rough lines, and when you make larger and larger objects, they should move in much smoother lines. Okay, so this is what the model told us. and we actually went and then tested it in the experiment. So we took objects that are larger and larger and larger. This one is 8 centimeters across. And just check the trajectory. And we see that the trajectory becomes smoother and smoother the larger the object is. Okay, so smooth trajectory is actually something very, very good. When I'm going from here to here and I want to reach there as fast as possible, it's better to take the straight line, right, the smooth trajectory, and not start going like this. Okay, so it looks like these ants are much better at carrying these large, non-natural objects than this mid-sized object that are much more naturally sized.
But the number of ants is bigger.
Yeah, yes. So here there's many more ants. Maybe it's a bit difficult to see. It's bigger, it allows many more ants. Okay, so for this it is better actually. But what also, you don't only have to go fast from A to B, you also have to respond to a new ant. Okay, so if we look now at the number of ants or the size of the object, we see actually that the response to a new ant that comes and tries to lead them is maximized here at around 20 ants. Okay, so if there's too few ants or too many ants, they won't respond well to this new ant. Okay, so there's to this leader. Okay, so there's actually a critical size or a specific size of the object, and it's actually the natural size of things they carry, where they respond best to this new leader ant. Okay, and how can we understand this? So actually we built an even simpler model where we changed this circle by a rectangle, and instead of allowing it to move on a 2D surface, we allow it to just move left and right. And this model becomes like very much like a model we know from physics. It's called the Ising model. And if we draw the same curve on this model, okay, the number of ants and how well they respond to a new ant, again we get this peak. Okay, and this peak in the Ising model is something that is very well known in physics. Okay, it's called the divergence of susceptibility at a phase transition. So actually, because these ants are noisy, if you put a few of them, you're in a regime where none of them can get correlated. Okay, so it's a kind of a tug-of-war regime, and the objects will be doing a random walk, and they cannot get correlated. And a new ant that comes, she has a good effect, but it very fast gets washed away in this tug-of-wars. Okay, so the ants are not cooperating. If you take a very large object, you go into the ordered regime, where all the ants are very correlated, and they're doing what I described before. They're just going with the group. Okay, each ant is going with the group. It moves smoothly, but a new ant cannot have any effect. And right when you're in the middle, between the non-ordered state and the ordered state, okay, this is when you can react to something that is on the outside. Okay, so usually in physics we look at magnets reacting to outside magnetic fields, and this is exactly this graph of a magnet. Yes?
Is it true that this informed ant can send a message to these others, like
Yes.
smell or some chemical message?
Yeah, so first there are chemicals involved. I'll show it near the end of the talk. And second, it could be that she's yelling something to everybody. Okay, but it would be hard to imagine, right? Because even if you put some smell, you have to figure out where this smell is coming from. You don't know if this ant is the leader or one next to her, or etc. But what this model tells us is we have a simpler explanation, okay? Maybe they're doing something more complex.
Actually, the shouting would not explain this peak. You would have the same responsiveness to all kinds of numbers of ants. If you shout.
Yeah. Well, here it's kind of a shout, because when one ant comes, a new ant comes and attaches and pulls, everybody feels her. Okay, they're attached to the same object. everybody feels her. So actually the message is disseminated very fast. It doesn't have to go one by one. Okay, they're all coupled very strongly through this object. Okay, and actually we went and tried to find some evidence for this optimality in the experiment. So if we have a very small item, as I said, small item, the ants act as individualists. So here is one ant and another one comes, and now they will just fight each other, going left and right and left and right, and they're not able to coordinate their motion. Okay, so these actually, that's this very rough motion, and they're not able to walk in straight lines. Okay, so it's quite ineffective. If you look at a very large object, okay, we're going to see a very short trajectory here where it moves very smoothly. So it does move very smoothly, but if it hits an obstacle, it cannot change its mind. All the ants, the group of the ants is set to move to the left, and to go around this obstacle, you need to go a little bit backwards because you have these U-shaped here, U-shaped legs. And you can wait for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, they're never going to cross. Okay, so the group is yeah, there's a hole here, yeah. So it confuses them, then they're just trying to go through here, they cannot turn back. And then if we take a natural sized object, okay, so that's kind of a random walk, this kind of has a ballistic motion, very straight lines. If we take something which is between the ballistic and random movement, or between the ordered state and the non-ordered state, okay, then it moves in lines that are kind of straight, not fully straight, but when it hits an obstacle, okay, it's the same kind of obstacle, and you just wait a little bit, and it can get across, okay? So you have it's the good balance between the group and that lets it move in straight lines and fast lines, and the individual that is leading the group, okay?
So I didn't understand that. What's the point of the little hole in the middle? I mean, what purpose is it serving?
So this is, it's actually confusing them, here it's actually directing the ants towards this direction.
I see.
Okay, because otherwise they could bypass the whole thing completely. So we wanted to take them into the trap and see then how well they solve it. Okay, so actually in this example I showed, we have the group, but the group did not add too much cognition. Actually, we see that the large group was actually very stupid. It could not cross the obstacle. The group just added the power, the strength, and the strength was employed to give this one leader that knew where she was going, give her the force to direct the whole group. Okay, so it's kind of like what we see in this picture here. Okay, so now part 2 of this talk. Okay, so again, let's look at this object when it went across the obstacle. We see that it does something kind of nice. It goes up and down and up and down, right? It has this, here it was a few of them, it can do more. But it has this up and it goes into this perpendicular motion. And then at some point, when it's near the edge, it's able to cross. Okay, and the question we asked ourselves here, okay, why does it start going suddenly up and down? Why is it not just stuck near this hole here where actually the ants kind of want to go through the hole, this is the shortest way home? Why does it start going up and down instead? And there can be two explanations for this. One of them is when it gets stuck, the ants that are carrying understand that something happened. Okay, we have an obstacle, and we should now do something different because what we're doing cannot help us pass the obstacle. So each ant looks inside its head or its algorithm and then changes the page in the book from a free motion to motion near an obstacle, and tells the ants, okay, if you're near an obstacle, start moving perpendicular to it. So this is one thing that could be happening here. Another one is that all the ants don't sense the obstacle or don't react to it too much. They just keep on doing what they did before, and somehow this thing comes from the group. Okay. So to look at this, we took a system which is a bit simpler. Instead of having an obstacle, okay, so this is direction to the nest, this is something they carry. Instead of having an obstacle here like a wall, we tie the string from here to the object and we tether the string here. Okay, so they can only go as far as the string gets tied. So you'll see at the beginning they go home, as we saw before. But now when the string is tight, they go into, again, this kind of pendulum motion, left and right and left and right. Okay, so this is simpler for us to study because it's more You get many, many oscillations like this, and you can do statistics, and you can study it better. Okay, and what we did, we looked at these oscillations first, and we took the same model that we had before. The model that we had before had nothing to do with obstacles or anything. It was just ants that are trying to pull in the same direction as their neighbors. So this is like of naive ants. They don't really know what's happening to them. And we just took this model, again, it's a mechanics model, and we added a string to it. So it's just a mechanical thing. You can add it in the model. And then what it gave us is this oscillations, okay? Just like the experiment. We see the same kind of oscillations, even though we didn't add extra knowledge to any of the ants. Okay, so this is kind of evidence that maybe the ants are not doing something different than they did before. And yeah, and I won't go over it, but you can actually do all kinds of measurements and comparisons to theory and see that, like a Fourier transform, see that the frequency of it and how it moves through phase space. And all of them, we get nice agreement with the experiment and theory. So again, it's kind of evidence that the ants do not realize that they're near an obstacle. And the next thing we did, the nice thing about this system is when you ask a question about is it a single ant or many ants, you can actually look into this question just by changing the size of the obstacle. So we're always giving them the same kind of puzzle, but at different scales. And we can kind of see what the effect of the group is. They're always trying to bring something home, if it's this big or this big or this big. Okay, so you're giving them the same puzzle and looking how they solve it for different numbers of ants. Okay, and so this is what we did. So actually this is the time of persistent motion, the time between turns of this. And it's just a probability function, okay? So like the probability for a persistent motion of 50 seconds is such and such, okay? And we do it for sizes for objects of different sizes, growing sizes. And what we see is for this small size object, the blue one, okay, we get something almost a straight line, like an exponential distribution. Okay, this is what you get if you were doing a random walk. Okay, but as you have larger and larger objects, more and more ants, you get a peak here. Okay, so you actually start to get a frequency, oscillation frequency, out of the same system just by having more ants. Okay, so we see this in the experiment, also in the theory, very similar lines. And again, it tells us kind of that when you have one ant, she acts very differently than what many ants do. Okay, so it means it's not that the one ant took out her rule book and read what she has to do now, but she's just doing the same all the time. And you get this transition between what you should do when you walk in free space, let's say, to what you should do near an obstacle. Okay, maybe I'll skip this as well. And okay, and you can see this transition again in the experiment. So again, this is the movie we saw before. For many ants, when they get stuck, they go into a left-right motion. And for few ants, so here we have a very small piece of plastic that they're carrying. And instead of going to left-right motion, they're just head against the wall, trying to go straight home. Okay, so very different. And again, this supports the fact that here the individual ants are kind of confused. They don't know what to do. Okay, they're just banging their head on the wall. And actually here the solution comes from the group. Okay, so we have some caveat in how the ants navigate, and the group is able to solve it here. Okay, and now the third part is again about another caveat in what individuals can give the group. And this caveat comes from the fact that the individuals are much smaller than the group. Okay, so what is the problem with that? So for example, here you see these ants are carrying a lizard toward the nest, which is on the right. And there's a leaf on its way. And this often happens in nature, as you can expect. And this leaf, the ants easily go under it, but the lizard cannot pass. So actually the ants, okay, so it's a bit similar to this crack that we saw before in the obstacles. So the ants want to go home through here, these knowledgeable ants, informed ants, they want to go home through here, but actually this is not the good way home. Okay? So here, the ant's view of the world is different from what the information she holds. It's actually misleading from the group. It's not good information. Okay, and here we see some scent marks. Okay, so this is one thing that these ants do use. They use scent marks. So actually, these scent marks are scent marks that were laid by informed ants that are trying to tell other ants that are walking around here which is the correct way home. And you can see here, these marks are wrong. This is not the correct way. The correct way is to go around. Okay, so actually, what is nice about these ants, so we were lucky, the species of ant, they actually have this very stereotypical behavior when they put scent mark on the floor. So they walk forward and then walk back a little bit and touch. You see, they're touching the floor with the end of their stomach. And this is when they put the scent mark on the floor. And the nice thing about this behavior, and it's usually not there for most ants, it's not there, that this thing, you can actually see it from the top. Just looking at the ants from the top, you can recognize this movement, okay, which is very nice, because from the side, you cannot see too much, right? When you film from the side, you cannot have a large field of view. But from the top, you can. And look at this movie. So this is an ant that we filmed from the top. And you can see the same behavior. She stops and moves a bit backwards. And every time she moves, we just, by animation, added these purple dots here to show you where she lays scent marks. So this is actually the first ant that found the object. She's now laying down a trajectory so to recruit others, so the rest will arrive. Okay, so we said that ants know the direction to the nest. They know where to mark, but not all the time. So this is where the ants marked compared to the Cheerio and compared to the direction home. And you see they're typically marking in the correct way, in the correct direction to the nest. They know where they are. They're very good navigators. They're marking to the right. Okay, you can actually calculate in bits how many bits of information each scent marks like this holds, and it's 1.4 bits, but maybe can understand it better by here. They mark towards the nest. So they mark in the correct direction, but it can be misleading. And now you can ask, how could the group navigate under these kind of uncertainties? Okay, so you have marks that are typically right, but sometimes very wrong, and they take you to a dead end. So how should the group treat this? And this is the answer that we think we found. This is mine? This is mine? Collective, okay. Collective, I will skip. So this is the answer we think we found, so I'll be very brief. So we found that individuals lay very short trails. So what they do is they go from the nest, from the object, they just mark a few marks and stop. They lay very short trails, okay? They don't go all the way home. Okay, so this is kind of like this. You always lay the next step. Instead of marking all the way home or laying this whole thing in advance, you always mark just the next step. So this is what we see them doing. The second thing that we see is that the group follows these scent marks, but not religiously. So I won't go into the graph because there is no time. But the group that carries, it goes by the scent marks, but not religiously. Sometimes it can leave or not listen. Okay, it's very different from the well-known notion of an ant trail, where the group actually, you can see a very long trail, and all the ants are religiously following it. Okay, so this is what it would look like. No? Yeah. So this is the object. Okay, so here we see the object and the scent marks, but we don't see the ants that are marking. We just see the marks. Okay, so there won't be too much information. And we see this, here there's a trail. It actually goes all the way to the nest. It's a very long trail. And the object starts to go on this trail, but after 10 centimeters, it loses the trail. It listens to it, but not always, as we said. Some ants try to guide it back. It doesn't listen. And now a whole new trail is formed and catches the object and again directs it towards the nest. Okay, so now it's again going towards home. Okay, so this is what it looks like.
This is just a recording of one specific experiment.
Yeah, this was one experiment. It's exactly what happened there. Okay, now we can try to see what happens near an obstacle. So this is an obstacle that we gave the ants, just a linear obstacle. They have to go from here to here, and there's a slit here. Okay, and we just looked how they cross, and we looked at all the scent marks that they laid during this crossing to see what happens. And just to show you what they did, so let's look at the scent marks. So here, near this near the place that the ants can pass, but the object cannot, we see that most scent marks tell them, go up here. Okay? Well, in all other locations, the scent marks tell them, go to the right. That's the way to pass. Okay, so that's what happened, and the trajectory of the object was like this. First, it was stuck here for a while, okay, because it follows the scent marks. But then suddenly it left, okay, because it listens to the scent marks, but not always. So it left. It started walking to the right, because here the scent marks tell it to go to the right. Started walking to the right, but then suddenly it turned to the left. Why? Again, because it listens to the scent marks, but not always. So here it's paying the price. So it started walking to the left, and then it turned again, and now it follows the advice, and crossed. Okay, so actually, this algorithm gave, if we look at it for obstacles of a different size, we can see that the passing time is linear. Okay, so it actually works very well. this kind of new kind of ant rail. Okay, so finally, I'll just leave you with this question that I started with. Who's in charge? Is it the ant that can do something very well, but other things not? Is it the group that is something sometimes very useful, maybe sometimes less? Okay, and actually what we see here is the most I'll give now is these arrows, and hopefully you can give them some theoretical meaning to these arrows. But we see that somehow the ant sometimes leads, sometimes the group is the one that has influence on what happens. Okay? And both of them live within each other. Okay? So the ant gets its information from the scent marks laid by the group follows the ants, etc. Okay? So we have some kind of intermingling of the scales here that hopefully gets the best out of both. Thank you very much.